Keep listening for This Just In from Outdoors, environmental news from the Monterey Bay, only on KZSC Santa Cruz.
KZSC.
Now, young fellas, been having a lot of fun around here today, haven't you? You know what makes this all possible? The forests around us. We should all be thankful for our forests.
You're tuned in to This Just In from Outdoors. Thanks. Today we hear about the environmental racism experienced by residents in California's Central Valley and the environmental justice movement's work to end the unfair health burden. And the Regional Transportation Commission has finalized its environmental impacts report for the North Coast Rail Trail. With environmental news, headlines, and more, stick around.
This Just In
From Outdoors.
I hope you're staying safe and dry today as we get hit with a bunch of rain.
An article in the Mercury News by Mark Gomez explains the extreme rainfall we are seeing this week and what meteorologists call an atmospheric river. Atmospheric rivers are thin but very long strands of water vapor in the air that can cover a large amount of area and cause high concentrations of rainfall. This storm taking place in the Bay Area and California coast is expected to possibly reach 8 inches by the end of the rainfall. It's being warned that many of the area's creeks, rivers, and water sources will rise extremely fast. Starting this last Tuesday night and onward, the rain is predicted to be finished by the end of Sunday here in Santa Cruz into the Monterey area, although this is still subject to change. This storm set in particular may be the biggest rainfall of the winter season so far for coastal California. Recently, a ranking system for atmospheric rivers has been developed, much like that of a hurricane ranking system. This is a way to numerically rank the scale of an atmospheric river, like the one we are currently experiencing. There should soon be an exact number for the one hitting us currently, while it's expected to be a 3, which is said to be a combination between beneficial and hazardous. A 5 on the ranking system, given to an atmospheric river, is said to be mainly hazardous, while a 1 would be considered mainly beneficial.
Here are some weather updates from the Santa Cruz Sentinel. We are in the midst of an atmospheric river, which will increase wind speeds up to 50 miles per hour, according to the National Weather Service. 8 county roads are currently closed, 3 of which are flooding and the rest blocked by fallen power lines and trees, as well as mudslides. If you are traveling out of Santa Cruz the next few days, check road conditions along your route. Portions of the 17 are currently covered by mudslides. And drive safely out there. The 17 experienced a 4-car pileup yesterday after partial clearing of a mudslide. Also, keep an eye out for flooding along the San Lorenzo River and in Paradise Park.
Grassroots groups like the Sunrise Movement and 350.org are mobilizing across California and the nation this week and next to promote the Green New Deal, a 10-year plan to fight climate change by weaning the country off of oil and gas. On Thursday, Democratic Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York and Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts introduced twin resolutions in the U.S. House and Senate. Masada Diesenhaus with the group San Diego 350 says the U.S. and the whole world need to work toward net zero greenhouse gas emissions, and fast.
The vision of the Green New Deal is really a massive program of public investment aimed at transforming the energy sector and the whole economy to create clean energy jobs and infrastructure, to decarbonize the economy, and to promote economic justice.
The Green New Deal calls for the U.S. to switch over to a national smart grid that relies on renewable energy sources like solar and wind. It asks government and private businesses to retrofit buildings for energy efficiency and for job retraining for people working in the fossil fuel field. Opponents argue that the policies would cost too much and be disruptive to industry. Green groups are asking for a state-level plan to phase out drilling in the Golden State, but Diesenhaus thinks the real potential is in the transportation sector, because in Southern California, vehicles produce almost half of the emissions.
That will have to change, and that can be through combined efforts to increase transit, have more active transportation like walking and biking, and electrifying vehicles.
The Green New Deal also emphasizes environmental justice. Its backers point out that lower-income communities have been disproportionately harmed by pollution from drilling and refineries, and by the floods and wildfires linked to climate change.
As climate change worsens and brings more drought, farmers in California have been turning to the age-old method of dry farming. Dry farming uses soil management strategies to capture winter rainfall and store it in the soil itself, completely removing the need for irrigation. Just 20 inches of rain, about the average for Central California, can support a whole season of crops. Crops like tomatoes, grapes, pumpkins, apples, and many others use that moist soil, saving 1 to 3 feet of water per acre.
Priyanka Runwal from the Santa Cruz Sentinel covered a story about a local farmer and his environmentally conscious practices. This local farmer practices dry farming. His name is Jim Leap, and he found his passion for dry farming when he started growing early girl tomatoes on the UCSC farm. Today, Jim Leap runs a 4-acre farm in San Juan Bautista and remains deeply committed to the practice of dry farming. What is dry farming, you might ask? Well, it's an ancient practice that requires careful management of soil, so winter rainfall can be stored in topsoil, to be used later throughout the spring and summer to grow crops. Jim Leap is not the only one committed to this practice. Stan DeVito argues that dry farming is a necessity for California. This is due to the fact that climate change is impacting our methods of producing food in California. With so many droughts, farmers have been relying on aquifers to supply water to their crops. The more farmers that can join the dry farming movement, the longer the groundwater will last in our aquifers. Dry farming is a potential alternative to the future of California agriculture.
The 2014 Sustainable Groundwater Management Act is aimed at consciously managing the water supply for future generations, but even still, sources are depleting rapidly, making water conservation a top priority. In Sonoma County, apple farmers are already feeling the pinch. Farmers must deal with a declining water table and salt creeping in from the ocean, so many turn to dry farming. Their products are slightly smaller, but have a greater nutrient density and a more concentrated flavor. The yields are also about 30% less. Dry crops need longer roots to reach the water deep in the soil, meaning the land supports less plants per acre than irrigated farms. Some say this is a recipe for poverty. Less yield means less profit on already struggling small farms. However, dry farmed produce is in high demand at upscale grocery stores like New Leaf and Whole Foods, as well as local restaurants. The rising trend is based on consumer claims that the produce yielded from dry farming contains richer flavors than the same products bought from farms using traditional irrigation techniques. Not all farms can afford to be dry farms, though, because of specific requirements, in addition to adequate winter rains. Temperatures cannot exceed 90 degrees Fahrenheit, the soil must be clay-dominated, and the climate must have morning fog. The southern San Joaquin Valley wouldn't be suitable for dry farming, so it's unlikely it will significantly overtake irrigation. But dry farming's philosophy is to grow the amount of food supported by the land itself, without artificial interference like irrigating groundwater. It represents an alternate path of agriculture in the face of water constraints, one that might be useful as drought becomes more common.
This month, UCSC professor Adam Millard Ball had his prediction used in an article written by Michelle Robertson of the San Francisco Chronicle on the potential downfalls of self-driving cars. Millard Ball, a professor of environmental studies as well as a transportation planner, believes that the use of self-driving cars will cause a gigantic rise in traffic within major cities, as well as potentially more than doubling the traffic in San Francisco. This is because these cars can be set on cruise. Instead of parking, which can cost a very high rate per hour, they can merely circle the block until its owner is ready. This would save money by just using a little extra gas instead of parking and paying the high rate that parking lots and structures cost. It would be ideal for the owner of the car. Professor Millard Ball says that setting the car to cruise can cost as little as 50 cents an hour, while many parking structures cost a minimum of $15. The problem with doing this, however, is the fact that it causes a higher concentration of cars on the road. With the use of autonomous cars to grow in cities within what is thought to be the next 5 to 20 years, this could be a huge issue with city traffic. A potential solution that he believes could be to charge to drive in certain areas, depending on its traffic and capacity for cars.
California just took a huge step toward the goal of running entirely on renewable energy as the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power announced on Tuesday that it's retiring 3 natural gas power plants. The LADWP, which is the largest municipal utility in the nation, says it will close the Haines, Harbor, and Scattergood gas-fired plants near the LA International Airport. Tim O'Connor with the Environmental Defense Fund says his group applauds the agency's plan to go 100% renewable.
The technology is available today to balance our electric load and to meet load growth with clean sources, as opposed to continuing the trend of using fossil fuels to provide electricity. It's really a huge step forward.
All 3 gas plants are currently operating but will now close by 2029. The Environmental Defense Fund estimates that closing the plants will reduce California's greenhouse gas emissions by 2 million metric tons a year, which is about the same as taking 425,000 vehicles off the road. Opponents say the closures will lead to job losses. The agency said its decision was influenced by a 2010 law that requires coastal power plants to reduce the practice of using ocean water to cool their facilities. O'Connor says it's a victory for people concerned about climate change.
But what we're seeing is a signal that we're going to be pursuing clean energy, clean resources, as opposed to spending billions of dollars on plants that we know are imperiling our planet because of climate change.
The LADWP is also working on a multi-year study on how to get 100% clean renewable energy.
On February 7th, the Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Commission released the final environmental impact report for the proposed North Coast Rail Trail project. It comprises the majority of Segment 5 of the larger Monterey Bay Sanctuary Scenic Trail network. KZSC reporters caught up with a member of the Regional Transportation Commission for more information on this story.
I'm Corey Coletti. And I'm a senior transportation planner and the program manager for the implementation of the Coastal Rail Trail. So the rail trail is a proposed multi-use trail, so for bicyclists and pedestrians. It's proposed to extend along the tracks from Davenport to Watsonville. So it would end in Pajaro and then connect to Monterey County's systems of trails that they're planning.
You mentioned the Monterey system of trails. What is the relationship between Monterey's transportation agency and the Regional Transportation Commission in the development of these projects?
Our relationship with TAMC is really interesting because the original vision for these trail systems was to and continues to be to develop a trail that would arc the Monterey Bay. So we work with the Transportation Agency of Monterey County to link our two systems. They also did a master plan for their system of trails, and we are going to be connecting the two networks in Watsonville at the Pajaro River.
So, in connecting all these trails together, what have the environmental impact report results been for the North Coast portion, and what environmental factors were taken into consideration when completing it?
The California Environmental Quality Act, it mandates that we look at 17 resource topics, and the ones that we paid special attention to are issues related to agriculture, biological resources. The North Coast has a very rich biodiversity, so we really focused on mitigation measures to ensure that sensitive habitats are protected or mitigated against. We obviously did our due diligence under CEQA, but certainly looked above and beyond in terms of, larger community benefits like providing interpretive signs at various locations so that people would understand the value of these existing biological resources or cultural resources. So really providing that educational experience as well as the trail system itself.
The final impact report is out in its entirety now. Is there a place where people can easily access it?
Yeah, the best place to look for it would be on our website. So that's secrtc.org/trail, and there's a link there to the North Coast Rail Trail project.
On March 7th, the RTC will be holding a public hearing on whether or not to certify the final environmental impact report at the County Board of Supervisors chambers.
Nayamine Martinez, the director of the Central California Environmental Justice Network, recently spoke to a conference held at UC Berkeley discussing the future of bioresources in the California economy. Environmental justice broadly is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people in the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. Environmental justice really reflects the fundamental reality that vulnerable communities are all too often subject to the disproportionate burden of pollution and contamination. Jasmine Alvergue edited the remarks.
There are different ways in which we could talk about this. So before I do all that, especially taking the example of the biomass facilities and how the impacts that it has had in the environmental justice communities, I just want to say that I work with the Central California Environmental Justice Network, or better known as CCJN. We have been in existence for almost 20 years. What I'm going to share with you, the reflections I will share with you today, are not only from my organization and my personal perspective, but pretty much are a shared understanding of my fellow EJ advocates who were not able to be here, but I am representing all of them. Our network has allies across the 8 counties of the San Joaquin Valley. And as you could see in our vision, we have the humble, we want to end environmental racism. So I think we're not going to be out of business in many, many years, unfortunately. But the reason why we actually even began to exist was because a lot of EJ leaders understand that the San Joaquin Valley was being affected maybe more than other regions by a variety of environmental problems that were affecting our health, our economy, and our well-being. And I would like to share this quote from the Lens a study that was done in collaboration with many environmental justice advocates, but by UC Davis, authored by Professor Jonathan London. So the San Joaquin Valley, especially this for all of you that might not be as familiar as we are with the San Joaquin Valley. So our region is wealth-generating agricultural lands, but at the same time, a lot of the people that live in this area are often facing the negative impacts of that toxic byproducts of the region, our region economy. And I know that nowadays the term environmental justice is very well known, and everybody, I'm sure you have read it, but I thought it was good to refresh our memories. So it's a fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people. Well, definitely the most important term in that definition for me is involvement, participation. And that's what I would like to continue highlighting here. Why is it important? Because what you see there in that slide. You know, the most impacted communities with air quality across the nation are in the San Joaquin Valley. So as you could see, 4 communities in the San Joaquin Valley are ranked at the top or worse, having the worst air quality. And the example that I'm going to talk in particular is biomass. They are energy producers and they're considered clean energy, but in reality, we take a close look at where these communities are located and their impacts. We can also see that they're a source or a threat for public health of the residents who live near these facilities. So definitely it will be worth exploring and comparing how these biomass facilities are playing in terms of not only producing energy, but the sources of emissions that come out of these facilities compared to other sources of energy. So in this chart, you could see natural gas, coal, and biomass. As you could see, the biomass has the highest emissions per megawatt of energy produced, both for CO2 and NOx, and also for PM 2.5. So that's just to bring to the reflection, is biomass a really source of clean energy? And there are many biomass facilities across the state. I just highlighted here the ones that were active in our region. The one that is still active is Rio Bravo, and I'm going to talk about it in the few next slides. But as you could see, these are where all the biomass facilities that we had in the valley floor. I will start with the one that now is idled, but was active in the city of Mendota. And I put there a profile of this community. So what I would like to bring into the discussion today is where are these facilities located or were located and operating. As you could see, the city of Mendota is ranked up in the top 96th percentile of Cal Enviro screen, meaning that, they really are impacted by, as you could see, the burden of pollution is 73, but the burden of PM 2.5 is 84. So definitely a very impacted community. The others are not that different. Stockton, Delano. Delano, this facility in particular, I just want to say that this one now is idle. It's not operating anymore. But in 2015, we received 20 complaints from residents who live near this facility. Out of those 20 complaints, the Air District fined 7 violations and fined the facility for over $30,000 because they were not controlling smoke properly. And finally, I just want to mention the community of Malaga, because this is an active biomass facility. This is still really active, operating, and it is in the possibility of getting expanded contracts to continue operating in the next years. It has subsidies from the CPUC because they are receiving forest waste. They also receiving a minor amount ag waste. But what really it's a concern for environmental justice communities is that this facility is less than half a mile from an elementary school. It's next door from a glass factory. These two are the largest sources of direct PM 2.5 that this community and our region has. So I don't know in what mind it makes sense to put these two facilities together and to put it that close to a sensible location, which is the school or the neighborhood. So our solutions or our suggested solutions would be that before, we are not against, improving the uses of energy and using it in a more effective way, but we need to be part of that discussion. You need to do a very comprehensive analysis of the environmental impact of where these facilities are put. And you need to bring the communities not after, once the facilities are already sited, but before. And I'm glad that I'm hearing both from the Air District and from the dairy industry that they want to have these discussions with communities during the process, not as an afterthought. And there are two concrete opportunities to do this. One is AB 617, which was already explained briefly by Samir, especially because the Malaga facility is just right outside the boundaries of one of the communities that were selected for AB 617, South Central Fresno. And as a member of the steering committee that is being part of this process, I could tell you that we're going to advocate so that the boundaries are changed and include this facility, because as far as we know, it's not using the best available retrofit technology. So that's the very first thing we would like to see. Another way of really making sure that these facilities are better neighbors to the communities where they're sited is, doing community benefit agreements, which is really not only mitigating the impacts, but even providing, as it was mentioned, scholarships, internships, or other ways in which the communities are getting a benefit from having these neighbors in their backyard.
After a comment made about the success Governor Brown made with implementing environmental policy, Naomi Martinez responds with addressing systemic barriers to environmental justice.
Well, I think that what we have seen is that in the previous administration, environmental justice has been more than something that is in the documents of the regulatory agencies. We have seen a more realistic approach to it, really taking the time to go and consult and meet and take into consideration the opinions and perspectives of the environmental justice communities, a more participatory processes in different ways. AB 617 is a perfect example. the recent process that we had to develop our new PM 2.5 attainment plan, and many others. However, I agree that putting all those pieces together is going to be a challenge, and most importantly, finding all the resources to make all those wonderful programs, continue and being able to be implemented. In particular, one thing that I'm very concerned about is that our PM 2.5 new attainment plan needs $5 billion additional dollars to bring the reductions that we need to reach attainment. And as I asked during the CARB hearing when this plan was approved, I was like, and what is going to happen if that money doesn't come through? Our residents of the San Joaquin Valley, the ones that we're breathing that air, what are we going to tell them? So that's just one example, but definitely, finding ways in which how to funnel these programs is going to be a challenge, and how to continue having this systemic approach. So, not only meeting with the investors of these bio resources in one aisle, and then the people that are suffering from those consequences in another, because we're not talking to each other, and that was a problem.
Martinez wraps up the environmental justice panel with reiterating the importance and necessity of integrating community-based participation in decision-making when it comes to environmental policy.
We believe, and we have been in support of not allowing biomass industry in areas of non-attainment, such as the area where I come from, where we live, because we already have the worst air quality, and these type of facilities are just exacerbating it, especially at the local level. And we don't even understand yet what are the impacts. We know how many tons of direct PM 2.5 are putting into our air, but more than that, we don't know. And that's what the opportunity that we're having right now through AB 617. We are able to expand the boundaries of that region to understand better the air quality, how Rio Bravo is contributing to the air quality of that Malaga community will let us understand how can, either the facility upgrade their technology or relocate themselves. But I would say that definitely for us is taking the opportunity to understand the impact of these facilities in the communities where they are sited. So that's why, for instance, for us, it's more about taking community-supported projects and keeping them near the source. So, for instance, we are concerned, as everybody else is, with the forest waste. But trucking all that dead trees to our valley floor is not the solution, because you are emitting two types of contamination, by burning that wood and by the diesel trucks that are bringing those dead trees to our valley floor. So for us, it's like, I know that there's some other alternatives that have been discussed, such as opening smaller biomass facilities near, I believe one in Oakhurst. So those kind of discussions where we are keeping those facilities near the source of what the waste is, and doing a very comprehensive analysis of the local impact for the communities where these facilities will be placed.
Thanks for tuning in to This Just In From Outdoors. Check out our stories and past shows online at newsfromoutdoors.bandcamp.com. I've been your host, Jasmine Albergue. Our headlines were produced by Gianna Ranieri, Adelaide Carlson, Camille Capasso, Mackenzie Morris, and Jasmine Albergue, with Susan Potter of the California News Service and Anthony Lezerowitz of the Yale Center for Climate Communications. The story on the Regional Transportation Commission's Environmental Impact Report was produced by Daniel Martinez. The talk on environmental justice was presented to the California Bioresources Economy Summit, which was held at UC Berkeley in late January. Jasmine Albergue edited this piece. Thanks again for listening. We'll be here next Thursday at 5 p.m. for another edition. Until then, we'll see you outdoors.
Just bees and things and flowers. Just bees and things and flowers.
Now, young fellas, been having a lot of fun around here today, haven't you? You know what makes this all possible? This forest around us. We should all be thankful for our forest.
This just in.
From outdoors.